As we begin to in 3, 2. One of the things that I like to do when I'm starting to transition away from my blockout form into my concept sculpture is to really study some reference photographs. And specifically, I'm looking for some anatomy cues. When we're sculpting our three-dimensional models, we want to strive for believability. We're not always trying to make the most realistic sculpture, although at times that's very cool, but what we're always looking to do is to make it look believable. Our audience is going to bring with them their own experience on what a grizzly bear is going to look like. If we can provide them with some information that they're already expecting to see in the model, like some anatomy, it's going to make them a little bit easier for them to buy in that what I'm showing them is believable. So we're not always going for realism, and the anatomy part gives our audience that little layer of believability that makes it easier for them to consume and understand the shapes that I'm presenting to them inside of my three-dimensional sculpture itself. Now, images like this that go a long way to helping us describe the primary forms, that big macro view. I've never seen a grizzly bear before. I've never been up close and personal one, so I really don't have any personal experience with these shapes. So these reference photographs are absolutely crucial in helping me as the artist understand what it is that I'm creating. However, to layer on those anatomical cues, we need some additional images. This is a really great example of how good we can have it, but it also presents some challenges. The fur on my grizzly bear occludes and hides a lot of detail that me as a sculptor is really looking for, so I can create a believable shape. So we need to start looking for some additional reference images that will help. And images like this are a fantastic place to go. I got very lucky on this project because through my reference research, I was able to find some really great skeletal systems, some skeletal drawings, This wonderful line drawing of how the bone structure on the inside of the grizzly bear works and looks like. Now there's some things in here that I'm definitely looking for. The shoulder blades, that's a big piece. On a big, heavy, 2-ton bear, those shoulder blades are responsible for, the basic movement, and they're a big part of our skeletal system. The other things that I'm looking for as I go through my skeletal drawing here is I'm looking to understand where all the joints are. There's the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist down here. These are pretty much in line with what I had blocked out, so I did a really good job at that, and it's like further validation and confirmation of how this object is going to move and rotate and generate its own locomotion. So that's really good. And of course, we have the same thing back here. Now notice on the back, the hip is much higher on the hip joint itself than it is up here in the shoulder blade. That's something that's different, something that we should note as we're sculptor, that the joint is way far in the rear versus a little bit more in the front on the forward part. The other thing that I'm looking for as a sculptor that these skeletal drawings really do a great job of providing me is an understanding of the spine. Not so much that this gives me a tremendous amount of detail, but it shows me where all the weight is. If you look carefully, the spine is at the top. There's not a lot of information in here. The curvature of the spine presents this wonderful curve on the bear itself, but really the central mass of our character is hanging from the spine. Something to consider and to think about as we continue to go through our sculpting stage. We know just based on this one image that the bear is carrying a lot of weight underneath itself, which is a little bit different when we compare animals to animals. The last thing I look for when I'm evaluating my skeletal system is just a really good understanding of where the neck is and how and where the neck connects to the skull. As one might imagine, the skull is super important for us to block out and to take a look at. We can see here the neck itself has a tremendous amount of information above it. It's not right up next to the top of the bear like it was on the rear. It's got a little bit of a fatty deposit and probably more likely some muscles on the top here that has put the skeletal structure more on the inside. It also protects the bear's neck as well. On the head, there's a couple things I'm looking for when it comes to the skeletal system. First and foremost, I want to try to find the mandible, the jaw. This is a big part of the skeleton itself, and it's going to be an iconic part of the head. it's really easy for us to see our jaws, and same with animals. They're usually the most pronounced part. On humans and in some animals, most animals, there's not a lot of fat and muscles in the jaw that really stops us from understanding what it looks like. It's almost raw, bone right there in the jaw, which makes sense because that's where we're chewing our food. And lastly, what I'm looking for in the head is just a really good understanding of where the eyes are. All great things that these skeletal drawings are providing me, and I really like that. Now, if you're lucky, one of the things that we can get pretty early on, in addition to this, is, and excuse me for a second, I'm just going to go in, is an image that looks like this. Now, this is another great image to get if you can find them. They're a little bit more difficult to find out there on the internet. This is called a didactic model, and it starts to show us the muscle structure of our animal itself. And again, we're not looking to model every single muscle, but we do want to use this to inform our modeling decisions. Specifically, there's a couple in here that are really important. These are common muscle structures that you see across a lot of different animals. And I've noticed that they're pretty consistent, so I try to make sure that I represent them in all of my animal sculptures. First and foremost, to make the head go up and down, check out this gigantic muscle that cruises right here. That's a huge part of our sculpture. I want to make sure that this muscle here and its counterpart going back this way are really represented. I always look for that V shape. And one of the things that I also look at when I'm looking at the muscle structure is how this one goes down. And then I also try to notice as best I can how all these muscles underneath the head and the neck go up. If you notice carefully, the strands of this muscle go up, which gives us a nice section here for the head. Now, again, we're not trying to model every muscle. That's not the idea. We're not trying to make this look like a Hulk bear, right, where we see every single muscle group bulging through the surface. But these small underlying details that are in the final sculpture should be suggested. They should be represented. Another thing that I look at when it comes to muscles are the elbows and the knees. I want to see how the muscles, or explore how the muscles are connecting to these two really big important areas for us, because the elbows and the knees are going to be clearly seen. If you think about it, the elbow, especially on animals, that's a joint right there, almost on the outside. And in the case of the bear, there's not a lot of fur there, so we're going to see it. And it's a hard, bony structure. That's something that we're going to see from a distance. Now check it out. We have muscle groups that come down this way that connect onto the elbow. That's important, right? Because I want to make sure that I'm suggesting this muscle group inside of my sculpture. Same on the back. It goes from the rear. There's a muscle. And you see this in almost all animals. It comes from the rear, right kind of where the tail is, and they wrap around to the front. We can begin to suggest that and layer that information in on the model. Now the belly itself, I always just like looking at the belly just to kind of see how the structure of the belly is being created. And most animals have this pretty consistent structure where they have a series of diaphragm muscles that are going across the surface like this. And then we have a nice big muscle in here that kind of fans out. So those are the important areas inside of the muscle structure that really go a long way in helping inform my modeling decision. And we're only ever going to see this inside of an image like this. Now, if we keep cruising along, one of the things that you'll see is that all of this kind of creates a wonderful, wonderful little profile. And we can't forget about how all of this information informs that silhouette, that profile shape. So, look and study the skeleton, the muscles. It's really going to help. But don't forget about the primary forms. At times, you'll get really lucky and start to find other images that can inform your animal. Now, I'm not modeling a wonderful rhinoceros, but if you look at its muscle structure, it's not too different from that of a bear. I can extrapolate. I can learn from a rhinoceros and layer that information into my bear itself. So this is a great image. And if you notice very carefully, check it out, there's some common muscle structure. Right in here, we have some great indications of that muscle that comes from the neck. Here's that same pattern that comes across that V shape that I was talking about before. Here's that elbow, and you see exactly the same muscle groups kind of concluding and terminating at that elbow. Similar muscle pattern on the belly as well. A lot of these large quadrupeds have a very similar underlying structure that we can apply to any animal. Here's another great example of that same idea. This is, of course, a cow. Same structure. Here's that muscle that comes from the top of the spine and terminates right underneath the shoulder blades itself. Boom, coming and creating that V shape. Big one here, and then another shape goes up towards the skull. Again, here's the same similar muscle structure terminating down at the elbow of the cow itself. All great things that can inform and make us a more intelligent sculptor that's going to create a more believable result for our audience. In addition, and lastly, this type of analysis and reference research really makes us a more informed sculptor. It's going to make us go faster. Our objects are going to have that layer of believability that's just going to make us work a little bit more efficiently. So start looking at some of these anatomical images and use the information that you can extrapolate and apply them to your own animal character.